Chapter 9 Lost at Sea. Hour after endless hour, they raced before the wind, always heading north. Yuki grew restless. The cramped position and the chill didn't help his discomfort. It made his whole body ache. Suddenly, a shout from the boatman aroused him. He pushed himself up to see a large flat area of ice on the right. Then another one on their on the left of the boat. Yuki realized the storm was blowing them into a jagged crack of a large field of drifting ice. They continued north until finally the crack closed in on both sides of them, and the boats came to an abrupt halt, locked in a wedge of ice. Everybody out, Grandfather commanded sharply. Pull the boat up on the ice. The men scrambled out of the craft onto the ice. Then, with a great struggle, they pulled the heavy vessel with its load out of the water. Forming a human chain, they dragged it far up on the large flat iceberg. After much difficulty, they tipped the boat over, and the weary men crawled under it for shelter from the storm. Safe for the moment, the whale hunters discussed what they should do next. Here they were, 10 men and a boy, alone on the vast expanse of the Bering Sea, with little food, drifting before a raging storm. Yuki fell into a fitful sleep, wedged between his father and grandfather. When he awoke, he could see the pale light of another day from under the boat. Still the storm raged, and after many long hours, it once more grew dark. Yuki spent another uncomfortable night trying to sleep. His legs pained with cramps, and although he tried to stretch them, he had little room to move. The next day, as the light shone weakly under the boat, grandfather and father crawled out to check the condition of the ice they were on. They returned with somber faces. The ice is broken apart because of the storm, grandfather told the men, and the waves are pounding our little island. I'm afraid if this keeps up, it will smash it to pieces. Darkness fell again on the tired and hungry group of hunters huddled under the overturned boat. Yuki slept again, only to have a dreadful crash jolt him awake. A large crack opened in the ice within inches of the overturned boat. Everyone scrambled to get away from the danger by moving farther up the ice floe. A large chunk of the ice field had broken. As it began to tip from the weight of the men and the boat slowly slid toward the edge of the ice. With strength born of fear, the men struggled to save the boat from slipping into the ocean. With straining muscles, they pulled the vessel to the center of what was left of their frozen island. It was now so small that the spray from the waves crashing onto the ice reached them even under the boat. Above the noise of the wind and waves, Yuki heard grandfather's voice. Creator God, you are the God who made this land. You are the God who placed us here. You are the God who watches over us. Save us, or we will all die. You have saved us before. Please save us again. Yuki must have drifted off to sleep, for the next thing he knew, he felt a hand shaking his shoulder. He looked up into the face of his father. Wake up, Yuki. It is light outside, and the wind has shifted around from the north. The ice we're on is beginning to break up. We're going to try to make a run to the island. As the men prepared the boat for launching, Yuki could see the sky growing lighter to the east. The wind had shifted until and now was blowing from the north. Snow no longer fell, and he noticed the waves were dying down. He was shocked to see how small the ice island had become. He could easily toss a rock across it now. The men pushed off in the boat, put up the little sail, and the vessel raced before the wind. Grandfather stood at the stern steering, his keen sense of direction telling him which way to go. The huge waves that seemed so much fun in the summer were now cold and menacing. As water from an occasional wave splashed into the boat, Yuki hurried to bail it out. He longed for his own little bed in the corner of Grandfather's house. Hour after hour, the craft fled from the wind, always heading southward. Yuki grew restless and thought to himself, "We must have missed the island." Yuki's father yelled above the wind to Grandfather, "I think we have gone too far." But Grandfather continued to steer the little boat in a southerly direction. Suddenly, one of the men sitting close to the front of the boat leaped to his feet and pointed with a shaking finger. "There! Look over there!" All eyes strained in the direction of the pointing hand. They could see the faint outline of the mountains behind Savunga to the southwest. As Yuki's keen eyes swept across the water, he also stood up suddenly and pointed excitedly. "Grandfather, look, the floats!" There in the distance, off the left side of the boat, bobbed two sets of sealskin floats. The hunters quickly lowered the sail, pulled out their paddles, and turned the boat toward the dark objects in the water. As the boat moved slowly towards the floats, there beyond them, everyone saw the outline of the huge bowhead whale. Carefully, the men brought the boat alongside the huge carcass. Grandfather pulled out his knife, leaned over the whale body, and deftly cut a large piece of muktak, or whale blubber, from the massive back. As the boat slid by the carcass, each hunter hacked off a large piece for himself. Grandfather handed a sizable piece to Yuki. The dark, tough hide and fat tasted especially good to him, since he had eaten only a few pieces of dried seal meat for the past few days. He could feel the strength returning to his body as he chewed the muktak. The men fastened the buoys to the back of the little boat and again raised the sail. At the same time, every man strained at the paddles. The boat, towing the whale, began to crawl slowly toward the island. Twilight turned into inky darkness, but they continued to paddle. Grandfather's uncanny sense of direction kept the little boat on course through the night, while Yuki fell into an exhausted sleep. As morning light began to faintly glow in the east, the outline of the mountains appeared straight ahead, so close that Yuki could make out the cliffs and the village. It was then that Yuki heard Grandfather's deep voice. Standing in the boat's stern, his arms raised to the sky, he spoke with great feeling. "Creator God," he called with Creator God, he called with his eyes lifted heavenward. "You have not only saved our lives, but you have given us this great gift. We thank you." Grunts of assent and agreement came from the boat. By midday, hunters from Savunga spotted the boat and the whale and came to help tow it to the edge of the shore ice. Grandfather supervised as they hauled the carcass up on the ice. Then the cutters began their work. They generously shared the meat with all in the village. But grandfather saved the choicest parts of the flukes, or tail fins, for his faithful friend Nathan Nunguwak. The hunters sent word to Gambel that everyone was safe and that everyone had caught a great whale. Soon sleds loaded with precious meat sped back to the village. Later that night, at the native dance of celebration, grandfather Nathan led in a ceremony of thanks, not to the spirits of the shaman, but to the great creator god. Yuki was the center of attention among the young people. They repeatedly asked him to tell of his experiences during the past few days. That night, in the quietness of his bed, he bowed his head and thanked the great Creator God. For now he knew, now he believed.